Welcome back. We are on video 19 of our series on the book by Skye Jethani, What If Jesus Was Serious About Prayer? So we're coming to the end of the book now. We're going to be covering chapters 50 and 51 today. And chapter 50 covers a topic that I think is pretty relevant to today. It's about loneliness. How loneliness really is a big problem in our culture, and many people, even younger people, say that they feel lonely often or even always.
Yeah, and it's something you wouldn't really think about is the idea of, we're probably almost is probably the understating. We are the most connected generation right now, with phones, social media. I know my parents love the FaceTime with the idea they can not only just hear and interact with my kids, audibly, which the phone's been around for a while, but now being able to see them and just, really with the ability to be so connected.
And that kind of almost makes me smile because it seems like everywhere I go now, everybody's on the phone. Everybody's
Oh yeah.
talking to somebody all the time. And it's like, I feel almost guilty if I'm not talking to someone. I'm like, who are they talking to? Anyway, it is a sign that, our culture seems very connected. But at the same time, Skye brings out in the book, there's a research by Professor Sherry Turkle, and her research shows that technology does eliminate boredom,
Yeah.
but it's actually the moments of boredom when we face sort of what's inside us, our fears, our joys, our beliefs, and our struggles. And she actually goes on to say that boredom is actually necessary for self-awareness. So it's only when I know who I am that I can share the deepest part of myself with others, and technology interrupts that process. How does that sit with you?
Well, absolutely it does. I mean, I think truthfully, I think of myself and as a chronic overthinker, I break up that chronic overthinking with some form of technology
Mhm.
quite often, whether it's scrolling just through the abyss, the endless abyss of YouTube, or just something like that, of just something to get my mind off of anything and everything, really.
I love YouTube. Anyway, Professor Turkle recommends that we actually cultivate the capacity for solitude, so that
Mm,
because it's necessary for us to actually form real attachments with people. And I know that part of the research says that you can still form attachments with people, but quite often it becomes codependent instead of interdependent, where we actually
right.
depend on other people and we don't form a deeper relationship. And so I thought that was quite an interesting perspective on that part of technology, and particularly about solitude.
Yeah, and definitely Jesus modeled the idea of spending a alone time in prayer.
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, we could say like, well, he didn't really have, some sort of device that he could keep in his pocket that connects you to anything and everything. But I
No, he
mean, I
only had
think,
5,000 people following him around.
yeah, like is that's right. I mean, he like it was hard to get alone. I mean, as much as yeah, 5,000+ people, but even the 12 people that were constantly
Yeah, with
would
him.
have been with him. But like he does model that, and we need to model that same thing. In fact, one of the things that he models quite consistently is one of the through when we read the Gospels is hearing moments of Jesus getting away by himself and praying is quite a normal part of that narrative.
Yeah, and so I think, as Sky says in the book, this relates to our concept of praying. Is that we need to spend time alone, one to have a sense of ourself that we
Mm-hmm.
share with God. So our prayers should be full of the things that we just talked about, our fears, our joys, and our struggles. And I like how he ends this part with this bold statement: if we are never alone with God, it's unlikely that we will recognize his presence in others.
Yeah, that's a pretty amazing statement actually, and I feel like it's something I'm really coming to relate to as well.
Yeah, me too. Okay, let's move on to chapter 51. So
Right.
This one sort of contrasts two ideologies. One, that faith is all about activity. So people assume the more we do for God, the more we'll be transformed. And
Right.
two, the other one is the opposite extreme of that, which is faith is all about passivity, where works, us doing things for God, actually diminishes God's grace. So we wait for God to miraculously intervene in our life and our character. And Skye iterates that neither of these ideologies is likely to experience the kind of transformation that Jesus talked about. So why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, my guess is that because one, we talk faith all about activity. I just don't think we take a moment to even acknowledge God. So that
Yeah.
how much of the things we can do for God,
Yeah. Is
without
us doing it.
actually,
Yeah.
well, and if we do these things for God and realize, oh, where is God?
Yeah.
That moment we can do that.
Exactly.
And I think the idea is that we keep looking for God, and we don't step out on the things He's like actually asking us to do, because there is action and response to those things. And like, transformation is a result of, I think it's, again, taking those moments in alone time with God that we just talked about, but also walking out what comes, what
Yeah.
the fruit and the response, whatever, of those alone times.
Yeah. So Skye iterates that in these two ideologies, neither are going to experience the transformation that Jesus talked about. And he suggests that the solution to that is to create environments that are neither all active or all passive. And that's what leads to growth and transformation. And then
Mm.
he refers to Eugene Peterson and what Eugene Peterson calls the middle voice, which is, I believe, how Greek writing happens. So to understand that, we have to know what the active and the passive, sorry, what the, in the Greek, the active voice is the person talking or taking
Mm.
action, and the passive voice is the one being acted upon. So those match up with the two ideologies. But then he talks about the middle voice. And this is where a group of people act on each other. And honestly, I really struggle with this concept quite a bit. I can relate to the active and passive part, but
Sure.
the middle voice really takes some thinking to kind of grasp it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think just also understanding that the middle voice is not us manipulating God, and it's definitely not God manipulating us. It's almost, it's this, I don't know what you want to call it. It's a conversation,
Yeah,
and it is where both, hopefully, I don't know that we all, I know I definitely can make mistakes in conversation this way. It is both taking both roles almost at the same time. There's a time to sit back and listen, and there's a time
yeah,
to add to the conversation. Um, and if you only listen and never add to the conversation, if you only just add to the conversation but never listen, it's not really a conversation. That's probably, you can't
no,
use
it's
that,
not.
that word anymore.
And then there's the acting out part, and I think this is what Sky really comes down strong in the book, is that the middle voice is when we're involved in the action. So we have this conversation, and then there's action that comes out of it, and we
Mm-hmm.
participate in the results, but we don't necessarily control or define it. That's what
Hmm.
God does. So it is this sort of cooperation or partnership with God that brings about the transformation in our lives, but we are neither we don't control it, but there is still action for us to do, but we don't do all of it because God also participates in it.
That's right. Well, and such an amazing, I think, understanding of grace is the fact that, as much as, yeah, we're not controlling, we're not defining it, but in that conversation, um, it's like God allows our voice to be heard in the midst of
Yeah,
it, and we do get to bring something unique, into this, obviously very broad and grander story.
yeah. And so I think to understand it the best way, we have to understand that the middle voice is what we've talked about: communion with God and cooperation with God. It's push
Mm.
and pull, give and take, action and reaction between God and us as we act upon each other. Now, I was trying to think of a way to a real life example, and I think the best thing I could think of is um, when my kids were in elementary school, and they're all grown up now, and I kind of miss those days sometimes. But
Hmm.
I remember they would come and ask me for help with their elementary school projects. Um, and when they're in the younger grades, I would basically do their project for them. And I got straight A's in elementary early grade projects. So from their perspective, they were being passive. I was doing the work for them.
Right.
And then if we look past elementary school, once it got to high school, they did most of the projects all by themselves. That's active from their perspective. I'm not part of it at all.
Yeah.
But there was those few in between years where they would ask for my help, and I would sort of help them define and I would control the project because they tended to get off track quite a bit, short attention spans and all. But at that stage, they were actually contributing ideas, and they did actually contribute work to the project. And you know, they continued to work on the. We worked on the project together, and I think it was us working on the project together that ended up making the project better. It wasn't exactly how I envisioned it.
Right.
They didn't really have a vision, so they worked towards and came out with something that they didn't really expect, and so I think in the end it ended up being better than either of us expected. They had no expectations. I had a very defined expectation, but together it became something a little bit different. But I think it showed both their personality and sort of my help to get them to the final project. So I think that really is maybe a way to describe that middle voice and the concept we just talked about. God could do everything on his own, but he chooses to cooperate and work with us. And our natural tendency, which I think leads back to the Garden of Eden, is we want to define everything for ourselves
That's right.
and do it even in God's name, which quite often ends up being really far from what God really wants us to have at all. So
Yeah, we like to stick our name in there as
yeah,
much as we can, if we're
we
being
really
honest.
do.
Yeah. Yeah, and so Skye then ends this chapter with this. I think it's a great statement. The gracious privilege of relating to God in this way is granted only to us because we alone have been made in His image.
Yeah, that
So yeah, it's such a gracious thing.
it really is.
Well, we hope that some of this has maybe been helpful, especially in how we relate to God. And that's really what, again, we're talking about prayer is. It's about relating to God, living a life with God. And we hope that, again, some of this book and even this discussion is leading you to think more and also just walk out in living a life of prayer.
Mhm.
So there are some questions that will be linked in the show notes for further discussion, for whether it's with friends, family, in your missional community groups, whatever. Please further this conversation. Please, even with friends and as a group, pray together, interact with God together, and just grow in some of these areas. It's definitely, I'll speak from experience. It's been a wonderful walk in this last little bit to do some of this stuff and think differently. It's been really helpful. So thank you. We have another video coming up soon. Have a great day.